now. So I want to welcome everybody back to this conversation the series that we're calling Relevant Conversations in the Current Crisis. And I think by now you've probably seen that we're opening the door to a broader range of topics. And the purpose and the intent of doing that is, number one, to share some collective wisdom. And that's really the whole purpose of this. And so when we ask for comments and feedback and questions and participation, this is really to have the greater benefit to the entire viewer audience so that you can get ideas and you can have things that resonate with you as we kind of all share our experiences together. And so today, we're actually going to share the story of a company here in town that had to really adapt and to pivot and to make a very quick and sudden change as a result of the COVID-19 crisis, and how they went through that process and how they kind of overcame the challenges and had to run through the obstacles. And we're kind of excited to be able to share this story with you today and hope that you'll be involved and hope that you'll ask any questions or provide any feedback or comments to us. And of course, as always, we'll be recording these calls and we will make them available on our website, on YouTube, and then on Facebook as well. You're invited to participate even after the fact, to put your questions in the comment section, either on YouTube or on Facebook or on our website. And we're happy to kind of open that dialogue up and start it. So we have with us today Mr. Matt Bellis with Seikowave. We're very glad that he can be here, because he's not on screen. So just to keep you from being confused here, I have my co-host with me today, which is Mr. Tim Yessin. So Tim, appreciate you
hey everybody
to join us here today. Tim hopefully is a familiar face to you. He was on our third webcast when he joined us with the rest of the group from WealthSouth. Tim and I are good friends. We have a lot of conversation, and it was Tim who brought Matt to my attention as someone who had to pivot under this crisis, and encouraged me to think about his story and potentially sharing his story on the series. And certainly after having learned more and having talked with Matt for just a little bit, we're kind of excited to be able to bring this to you by way of getting some thoughts out on the table that hopefully will encourage you and inspire you to do the same, because we know there's a lot of businesses right now who are really struggling, who are really suffering, who may feel like they're kind of in just a standstill. And we want to encourage you that this isn't the time. This isn't the time to stand still. This isn't the time to rest or to sit back or to put your hands down. This is the time to really start thinking. It's the time to maybe even look about how you can pivot and change your company. And it's really talking about the ability to adapt in your sense of direction while really staying grounded in a particular focus. And I think you're going to see that today as we talk with Matt Bellis. So Matt, we appreciate you being here and sharing your time with us today. I know we can't see you on camera, but we still get a chance to talk to you. And we know, and as Tim has shared with me, you're an extremely busy guy. And so for you to take 30 minutes of your day, and I know you've got a phone call you've got to hurry up and get back to that we were just talking about earlier. So without further ado, I want to welcome you to the show.
Mark, thanks. Tim, thanks for the opportunity. It's probably better that I'm just a black square on your screen anyway.
Well, I
save
don't
a
think
lot
that's
of grief for the people.
But I obviously didn't want to do this one by myself, so I had to have a pretty face on with me. That's Tim in this case.
Yeah,
But,
you didn't choose well, Mark.
I didn't choose well. Well, I'll leave that to public opinion. So if you do have a comment you would like to make, feel free to opine on that.
Please withhold this.
No, but we're glad that you're here. What I'd like for you to do is, I mean, I've heard bits and pieces of this story, and I've looked through some of the material that you had provided me earlier, and it blows my mind, and it really encourages me to even think about my own business. Sometimes I think we get caught in a rut of what we're doing, and we just continually think inside the box. And when things happen, it forces us to think outside the box. And so I definitely think that you have done that here. And there's a quote that I want to start the session off with, when it talked about how business leaders need to pivot. And you can tell me whether you agree or disagree with this, but it really says it's the ability to keep one foot in the past and one foot in the new possible future. And really, I think what you're going to share with us today is probably the perfect illustration of that. Would you agree or disagree with that?
No, I think that's what we've done here. I don't know that we consciously thought of that quote when we did it. It's just more or less what we had to do. So I'll be happy to share. I got just a couple of things that we put together really for other purposes, but I think they're kind of relevant here. Let me pull up some information that we put together. So this is what we were doing.
Okay.
Our pre-COVID business was basically around the use of 3D imaging. We were just getting ready to launch a intraoral 3D imaging system that would allow you to acquire a bunch of 3D data on the inside of your mouth. That data could be used to design a dental component. One example that is a really good market, or at least was 6 weeks ago, is the ability to do clear aligners, which you could then 3D print, and then the patient can basically just install them themselves as part of the orthodontic treatment. So we were geared up for this. And then as an extension of that, if you look at the intraoral scanning, and then you think about, well, other things around it, we had also developed scanners for face scanning, and then the ability to integrate face scans and intraoral scans with data that comes from other people, so that you could have a kind of complete 3D model of somebody's face and use that to look at sort of maxillofacial surgery applications, implant applications, a whole variety of applications that are focused in sort of the medical dental space. COVID-19 came along and all that business just stopped. Dentists were closing. The other business that we have was focused around providing these 3D imaging systems that you can see kind of on screen. That I'm not sure if you can see my mouse.
Oh yeah, perfectly.
Yeah. Okay, right. So that scanner, which we can use for face scanning, we were using in the oil and gas industry. And it turns out when oil goes to negative something a barrel, there is a lot less interest in oil and gas companies for buying our scanners. So we saw that business dry up pretty fast.
Okay, so you've had to stay nimble even without the dental industry piece. So prior to that, you had other things that you were doing, and as a result of COVID-19, it kind of put the brakes on multiple facets of your company, correct?
That's right. Yeah. We heard back from the oil and gas industry that they couldn't do inspections, mainly because they didn't want to have people in the same room or the same facility. So that business got shut down, and the dental business got shut down. And then we got a call through the University of Kentucky, the medical school there. Seikowave has strong connections to UK. The core technology comes from the University of Kentucky. One of the co-founders of the company, who's also our CTO, is Dan Lau. Dr. Lau is a full-time faculty in the electrical engineering department at UK, and he collaborates, with people on campus in various things that have to do with 3D imaging. The medical school contacted him and wanted to know if his lab on campus could do face scanning. And Dr. Lau said, well, yeah, he could probably do face scanning, but he felt that Seikowave could probably turn this very, very quickly. And so the UK medical school, Dr. Mike Winkler called us and wanted to know if we could do face scanning. And the application was basically to do these custom respirators. So the advantage of a respirator for the medical staff is that it protects the staff worker, as well as preventing infections from basically leaving that medical worker and going to the patient. So you get kind of a two-way protection, more protection than you would get, say, from a conventional surgical mask. So the medical school, we've been working with them now for 3 weeks, and we took the same process that we had in place and really the same partners, and we said, well, if we can go scan to design to print in dental, we can certainly redo this and do it for a custom respirator that's going to be a perfect fit to some doctors or some nurses or some medical workers' face. And we found that there were other people that wanted to step in and be part of that process. So we got support from Toyota, not just UK, but Vanderbilt and Lexmark, Envision Tech, which is a leading manufacturer of 3D printers. We then got support from Chevron, who's one of our lead shareholders. And we even started getting some good technical advice from 3M. The early mass design was not that popular. So
I wonder why.
So we moved on from that to, this is basically what this custom respirator looks like right now. And this is the first design. It passed inspiration and expiration, and now we're moving on to filter media testing. And the process is, 3D scan, convert the scan to a CAD surface for doing the design, and then we match the design to the person's face. So in this case, Dr. Winkler got a mask that perfectly fit his face. And one of the materials that we were able to take advantage of was basically a new material that was originally designed for a lot of dental applications. It's that flexible black material. Now, these are the filter cartridges, and these get assembled with that into a custom fit respirator. That black material is a biocompatible material that conforms to the face, and as you talk, it will stretch and move with your face and maintain a good seal. And so we were able to basically take technology and relationships and a workflow that we had created for one application, and we had to pivot pretty quickly to another because frankly, if we don't do that, eventually we'll run out of cash in this situation where it's hard to generate revenue. And yet with these custom fit respirators, we can not only generate revenue, but make a pretty important contribution to what's happening out there. In fact, the members of the Kentucky governor's cabinet have contacted us, and one of the things that they're looking at is how do we get the state reopened? And the more PPE that people can have, that's personal protective equipment, the faster you can get workers back to work, the quicker we can get the economy restarted, and everybody's pre-COVID businesses can get back online.
Wow.
Now,
God, that's a great story.
Oh, it is. It is amazing. But take us back, because give us a little bit of perspective here. When you talked about your business kind of drying up, in the oil industry and then in the dental industry, I mean, it didn't take you to zero, but it came pretty close. So how close did it take you as far as your revenue streams are concerned?
Yeah, so it kind of took about 75% of our revenue and just wiped it out for the next 6 months. We saw that our order funnel pretty much got pushed out. The one part of the business that is still producing and shipping equipment is in the robotic space. We've got a whole line of 3D imaging systems that are designed to work with robots. And since robots don't need people to do the work, and robots can't really get COVID-19, that business is still moving forward. And in fact, it looks like that might actually grow a little as these inspection companies start to figure out how they can do more robotic work and then need more robotic tools as a consequence. But yeah, it was a pretty big hit.
Matt, take us through, because I know you brought pretty quickly through the transition from where you started. Take us back to really the technology, because I know it's a relatively young company. Take us back through the beginning. What was the genesis of the company in the beginning?
Yeah, so I've mostly done high-tech startups. Mm-hmm. And for some reason, after I exited the one company ago before Seikowave, I felt like 3D imaging was going to be a fairly critical growth technology and was going to have a lot of applications. And I spent about 9 months looking at different research groups around the world to see who was doing the best 3D imaging, and kind of narrowed down my search to just a few universities, but University of Kentucky was doing the best work. The 3D imaging technology here was incredibly fast and very well aligned with the semiconductor roadmap, so that there was a natural cost down curve. So I came out and met with the principal investigators at UK, Dan Lau being the head of the lab that was producing much of the best work, and put a license agreement in place, and we set up a facility in Lexington. And then I hopped on a plane and I flew back to Tokyo, because that's where I was living. And you know, when you take off in Tokyo, you get a beautiful view of concrete everywhere. And when you land in the Bluegrass Airport, you have this pastoral fields. I mean, there were thoroughbreds galloping across. Who wouldn't want to live here? So we decided that we would do more than just set up a tech transfer. We ended up making this kind of the center of mass for the company. And the early application for the technology was really in the oil and gas industry. Yeah. Walking up to a pipe with a 3D imager and acquiring data.
So what originally, I know you and I have had these conversations before, but with the pipeline, what generally would they do prior to your technology?
You don't want to know.
No. And
can you even say?
I'd rather not, guys, but you take basically, hundreds of millions of investment in steel infrastructure in these pipelines, and then you do a survey of your pipelines from the inside with equipment that costs tens of millions of dollars, and then when you think you have a problem, you go dig up the pipeline and you look at it, and you give a guy a ruler, and you say, well, what do you think? Does it look as bad as our $10 million piece of equipment told us?
Wow.
So, dial back 5 years, and that is what people were doing. In fact, I remember asking one guy, what's the longest dent you ever measured? This was a technician in the oil and gas industry, and he gave me a kind of, smart ass sort of answer. He said, the longest dent I ever measured, it's never longer than my longest ruler.
That's pretty good.
So,
that's a little scary.
Yeah. So now we got a lot of tools out there now, and people use 3D imaging, and they'll hold our cameras in front of, it could be a pipe, a tank, a pressure vessel, any piece of infrastructure. We even do bridges now. And they can push a button, you get a 3D image, and then they can push a few other buttons to do analysis that complies with the U.S. Federal Code of Regulations for determining fitness for service for the assets.
Wow.
So that's what's been generating most of the revenue for the company in the last 3 years. And we were on track to have our best year ever this year. Now, we may still have our best year ever, but I don't think it's going to be from handheld tools into the oil and gas industry. It may be from robotic tools there, or it may be from some of the stuff that we're doing with the custom fit respirators. But the regulatory aspect of our business does mean it will come back, because it has to. But man, people are pushing stuff out, either because they've had to furlough their workforce, or the states put them on a kind of lockdown, and they can't even get their workforce out there without jumping through a bunch of hoops. Fortunately, the robotic stuff is starting to let people fill that gap, where they can take a robot and they can say, hey, we don't need to have 6 people on site. 1 person, 1 robot, and they're good to go.
Wow. So do you see this pivot that you made toward the respirators? I know right now the demand is certainly really high for personal protective equipment. Do you see this continuing? That this is going to be a permanent pivot for you maybe like a permanent type of fixture that we'll see in hospitals and in surgical centers in the future?
It could be, because it turns out that there was a bunch of different groups that we are now talking to in hospitals that have always wanted to have stuff like this. There's just never been a big driver, right? They've always wanted to have a custom fit respirator. The other group of people that want to have a custom fit face mask are sleep apnea patients, where these CPAP masks, if they don't fit very well, they lead to discomfort, and you can even get kind of whistling noises that make it difficult to sleep. So there's a variety of applications where being able to go from the unique characteristics of someone's face to some specific product is very beneficial. The one that I want to try for myself is I would love to have a scuba mask fit to my face. I want to do the field trials on that one.
So you're taking a personal passion and making an application too.
You know, I've always dreamed of scuba diving, but I've only actually had the chance to do it once. Turns out from Kentucky, it's not so easy.
Although, interestingly enough, we have a scuba dive instruction team here in Lexington, Kentucky.
Yeah, I heard that.
Find that incredibly interesting.
Yeah.
So, when, the nearest body of water is probably, not, I guess, Lake Cumberland, or I guess Harrington Lake.
Yeah.
See a lot of scuba applications there. But anyway, I think I find it interesting that you had, speaking of inspections, just to kind of come back to a point that you had said earlier, this dental phase really hadn't been pushed out, right, entirely at the point that COVID, it was just something you were ramping up toward. So you had big plans, you were moving those plans forward into the new year because you're going to diversify your revenue stream.
Yes.
And then all of a sudden, COVID comes in and just kind of smacks it down, from what I understand, or at least temporarily.
Correct. Yeah, so I think it's a delay. We had basically, at first week of March, we had booked an order for about $7 million worth of those intraoral 3D imaging systems. And we had production in place, and we were ramping towards production. And our lead customer, they had a great business plan to go forward with. Unfortunately, they were headquartered in Madrid in Spain. And so by the third week of March, it was, hey guys, we don't know when we can launch. We can't even go to the office now. The whole dental industry in Spain shut down. So we really had to put those dental plans on hold. And then we started to, other parts of the world where we were expecting to ramp. US went next with pretty much all of our dental customers shutting down and delaying plans until maybe the end of the year. So we think by November, we'll probably be able to be back online with the dental business. But between now and November, I don't expect that we're going to see any appreciable revenue coming out of the dental market.
So you had to find your next lifeline, in essence, and this is it.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
So.
And it goes back to several things. One, I think you kind of enumerated them pretty well. So it goes back to prior relationships that you had built, right?
Yes.
The fact that you had equipment that could at least be repurposed. And then thirdly, I guess, is your vision to say, well, what's there to stop us? I mean, it's a different application. I would say it's even an application that might bear a little more risk, which would scare some people, maybe potentially. I don't know. Did that ever factor into your thought process when you were thinking it's one thing to make dental apparatuses, that's for the correction of teeth and or to put, a false tooth in or things like that. It's another altogether when you're talking about the safety of anybody who's wearing the mask. So that cause you to take a step back and breathe a little bit and go, well, maybe.
Well, we did look at that really hard, right? And so we are going through the process right now. We've seen a lot of people out there talking about 3D printing masks or sewing masks. And I've contacted half a dozen of them wanting to see if there's opportunities to maybe collaborate.
Mm-hmm.
So far, none of the ones I've spoken with have looked at the NIOSH requirements for either custom respirators or masks. Many of them don't even know that there's a difference between a custom respirator or a respirator, which is what we're doing, in a mask. And they don't understand the kind of subtleties between which ones you use in which applications and why. So we have taken a hard look at this. Now, it helps us that one of our board members has deep domain expertise in the respirator business. And then also, if you think about the other businesses that we've been in, the oil and gas business takes safety very, very seriously. And we had to go through extensive qualification to demonstrate to the oil and gas industry that our answers were correct. Because you don't want to deliver a tool, hardware, software tool, into that market and then find out that because your tool was wrong, a pipeline exploded.
Right.
So we were quite familiar with what it meant to both move into a market where there's a high risk to failure, where there's a large regulatory component that you have to basically step through in order to be able to supply to that market. And so, we've got the experience, or we had the experience going into this to basically understand exactly what we needed to do to mitigate that risk.
Okay, so you just added to my fifth element, is that you look back to your past and you realize we've kind of been there, done that before, just on a different level. So that, when we think back to that, we can probably think back to some strengths that we have that we can pull forward into the current circumstances. And that'll mitigate, a lot of our risk or our fear of failure. I think a lot of times what holds us back when we think about adapting, when we think about maybe thinking outside the box or bringing on a new line of revenue or doing something that otherwise people might scratch their head and saying, I don't understand where you think you're getting your expertise to go into this area. I think back to my past and about different things that I took on that I may or may not should have taken on, given the risks. When I went to Midway University and took on the task of being the CFO during obviously during their financial crisis, I had not been in higher education before. I'll tell you that much, and it was a totally different world. But there were other experiences I was able to kind of bank on and go back to, and even relationships. So you're talking about relationships that you had. You had somebody that's on your board. Was that somebody that was on the board prior to this or after this, or somebody that was brought on the board as a result of this?
They were on the board since day one of the company.
Okay.
And it was, in this case, it was one of these fortunate circumstances where we had someone who knew all the hoops we were going to have to jump through and helped us get up to speed quickly.
Mm-hmm.
There are certainly hoops we've got to jump through that we still have to learn. But
Sure.
we also knew that this was going to have to be a team effort. We had domain expertise in the 3D scanning to print part, but we needed other people to step in and help us with design and media and navigating the regulatory environment. And so we ended up pulling together a consortium of people, largely people that we knew and some people that we didn't, but that we now know, who really helped fill out all the roles. And that's how we were able to kind of mitigate a lot of the risks that are associated with jumping into basically a new business here.
Yeah,
and as
really,
a business, go ahead, Tim.
I was just going to say it's remarkable how fast you moved and changing your a third of your business potentially, and it's really remarkable how fast you moved in this crisis to get there. It really is a testament to being able to work hard and pull all those assets together like that.
Yeah, what's that old saying? When what is it, like a wolf chases a rabbit, and the wolf is running for its dinner, but the rabbit is running for its life.
Absolutely.
So we were highly motivated.
Yeah.
Well, I think I've said this quote before, and Tim, you've heard. I mean, it's not my quote. I'm quoting it from somebody else, but necessity is the mother of all innovation and invention. I mean, that's exactly what it is. If we want it bad enough, and if we're hungry enough, and if it's threatening enough, we'll find ways around it. We'll run through the obstacles, and it sounds like that's what you've done. There was plenty of things that you certainly had on your side, but it wasn't absent or sans any obstacles or anything that were otherwise barriers that you had to push through in order to move this thing forward. And so that's commendable that you found the resources necessary to do that, whether that was inside yourself or outside yourself. And I think every small business can take note of that.
Yeah.
It doesn't necessarily have to be someone who's in your particular industry, but can be ancillary to that has some kind of value to bring to the table or to help you even to strategically think. I mean, I think that's one of the things that, Tim, just as you and I, kind of got to know each other and started having coffee and chatting. And we bounced ideas off of each other. We talked about different strategies. We have that kind of in common with one another. And even as I was looking at putting this series together, to try to open this conversation up in this community, my business partner and I talked about it at length, but I wanted to kind of get outside my element and go to someone else and get their thoughts too. Not because I didn't trust my business partner, but we're in the same boat in a way. So I had to kind of step outside my boat a little bit and look to the people that I had tremendous respect for, look at the people I had a good relationship with, who I had prior networking opportunities with, and just say, help me think this through. And that can be so valuable. And it's just something that we want to encourage business owners to do, that they need to kind of group together in times like this and find people who can, in their own respective way, not maybe be a formal board of thinking heads that maybe you get to have that opportunity because you had a board in place prior to. But some of these small businesses, they are the board. So they need to look at building an advisory board, if nothing else, of people who can kind of think out loud with them. And we hope this kind of venue now, and even people hearing about your story, that they'll want to move forward and try to say, what kind of group can I form that not only where I can help and I can serve, but where I can look for help myself. And I think that's invaluable. And so, I appreciate tremendously what you shared with us today, and how quick and nimble you guys had to be, as Tim said, how, the relationships came into be, how you happened to be, and you liked Lexington, and Lexington happened to serve you on many levels. I guess I didn't realize Kentucky. I mean, I know that University of Kentucky is extremely innovative, especially when it comes to medicine and some other things, but I don't know that I thought that they were innovative on the 3D imaging side. So I didn't know that beforehand. Tim, I don't know if you, I guess you knew that beforehand because you. It's
always good to hear. You hear the anecdotal stories occasionally, but it's great to hear when you get someone with a global perspective, as Matt has, to give that endorsement of the programs over there. Absolutely. Yeah, Matt. And one question, you hear this quite a bit, and I want to get your take on this before we go. You hear people say this, a lot of business owners that I know have said, this is going to change the way we do business forever. And obviously this big part of the innovation that you brought on as a result of COVID, that's the obvious part. What are some of the smaller things, how you do business? I know you travel quite a bit. You're my neighbor, and I see you leaving at that 5 o'clock flight from Lexington quite a bit. Tell us how this might change, the having to be remote. How's this going to change Seikowave in the future? Maybe how you do your business interactions and some of the other things you do.
Sure. So right now, we can't go on site to train most of our customers, and they typically need to have refresher courses every year. So we're trying to figure out how to move a lot of those training courses online, and then how to do remote, really more like remote control, where if somebody has our equipment and they get stuck, that we can, from Lexington, no matter where they are in the world, we can dive in and take control. And a lot of these tools, they've been available for a number of years, but we've never had to use them. And now we're finding that we have to use them. And so we're having to set up the software infrastructure to let us to be able to do that. So that's one change. And you're right. I mean, you know, in a typical year, I'll travel more than 100,000 miles. This year, I don't think I will. I mean, I'd be lucky to travel 1,000 miles this year. So it is likely to change the way we think about the necessity of having these face-to-face interactions. You know, to the extent that we're able to supplant them with sort of web-based tools and the type of conferencing that we're doing today, we're starting to look at that much more seriously. And so that will probably always be there too. The other thing that we're looking at is it's going to be challenging for some of our customers to bounce back and be at the same economic position they were, you know, at the end of February. So we're looking to redo our whole commercial model as well. We've started thinking that for our customers that would normally have purchased our hardware tools, we're now moving those onto a subscription base, where basically they and there's two models we're looking at. One is, you know, they pay us a monthly subscription like you might for a cell phone, but the other is that they just pay us basically when they have work. Right, and that way, a small inspection company that might only be 3 or 4 people that would like to get a tool so that they can get out there and get to work, but can't afford to, you know, write a check for $50,000. We can go to them now and we can say, hey, you know, this tool, we're just going to send it to you, but when you go out and do work, right, you're going to get paid and we're going to get paid. So it's, you know, we're having to rethink how we structure our commercial arrangements. So that we can figure out how do we continue to have a contribution that we can make in the inspection business when you've got people that haven't had a paycheck or a dime of revenue in 3 months.
I think that's probably one of the best notes as we can kind of conclude this, is the fact that you're thinking like that. You know, I think you hit the nail on the head. You said we still want to make a contribution, despite the fact that, you know, there's people who, you know, are going to be limited and not necessarily have ready access or funds available, that you're looking and exploring those ways in which, you know, they can win and certainly you can win in the process, but you're putting that forward in a way that you can help them get back to work.
Yeah.
On a much faster clip than what they could otherwise. And I think that's the kind of thinking we all need to be involved with, you know, because we got to look at the person that's across the table from us and realize, well, what can I do to help them, you know, get back on their feet faster? And at some point in time, I mean, obviously you're going to get paid at some point in time, whether that be through the piecemeal or whether that be through the subscription service, but certainly you're not getting your money up front that you were used to before.
That's correct. Yeah.
But you're looking at something bigger than yourself. And I appreciate that comment so much. That's just the way all got to think right now. And I think that's perfect. Anything else, Tim, that you can?
No, I think, Matt, I really appreciate you being on. I think your story is a great story, as we've done our across the fence talking here and there over the years. It was really good to hear it all brought together like this. So I appreciate it. Thanks for your time. I know you're very busy right now, but great hearing your story.
Thanks.
Absolutely. And Matt, I know you've got a phone call that came in right when we started getting ready for this call, and I'm sure you're anxious to get back to it. So we're going to let you do that. And again, we just want to thank you for your time and appreciate your willingness to participate in this conversation and share with all of us. And so until next time, we pray everybody is safe. We pray that everybody can continue to enjoy a good measure of health, if it is that you haven't been so adversely affected by this coronavirus. And for those of you who have been and you're struggling with loved ones, you know, who are having to deal with this and or your family members are right on the front line as they're in the medical community, our prayers and our thoughts are certainly with you at this time. And we pray we've encouraged somebody today, and we hope we've inspired you to think about your own business. Tim, I appreciate you willing to participate in this call together.
Likewise. It's always good to be here.
Friendship. It's always good to talk with you, and I appreciate you bringing this one to my attention so that we can share it with more people. So thank you as well. We hope everybody has a good day. Remember, these are recorded. They'll be available for you later, just in case you weren't able to attend the entire session online. And we hope that you continue to participate with us on Mondays and Thursdays as we continue this series. So we'll say goodbye to everybody. Goodbye, Tim. Thank you again, Matt. We'll see everybody later.
Thanks, Bart.
So long, everybody.
Bye-bye.
Take care. Bye.